Over time, the pattern between them becomes visible. The way you're letting the ideas surface organically is actually the right rhythm for a project like this. When a symbolic system is alive, the archetypes tend to announce themselves instead of being forced into place. What you're doing right now is more like listening than inventing. A few clear patterns are already forming in what you've said. First is the theme of authentic expression versus emotional containment. That polarity really is universal. People suppress grief, anger, tenderness, fear, even joy. Cultures often reward composure while quietly punishing vulnerability. Because of that, the archetype you described can speak on multiple levels at once. Containment could represent holding emotions inside social masks, rigid systems, structures that compress energy. Freedom or release then becomes honest expression, emotional truth, creative flow, liberation from patterns that no longer serve Fekine. So the card pair becomes less about rebellion and more about energy being allowed to move again, when something that was tightly held finally breathes. That fits very naturally with your growing language of light phenomena as states of being. Light in the sky often behaves in ways that mirror inner psychological shifts. You've already named a few that could become recurring symbolic backdrops. Aurora movement of living energy across the sky, awakening currents. Eclipse temporary obscuring that reveals hidden structures. Star field orientation, guidance, long-range awareness. Solar burst or radiant halo, sudden illumination. Realization comet or meteor trail, a catalyst that disrupts the ordinary path. Those could become visual atmospheres around different archetypes rather than rigid suit labels. Let them remain symbolic weather systems for the moment. They might eventually shape suits, or they might simply be the deck's cosmological language. As for emerging major arcana concepts, a few ideas seem to be hovering around the edges of what you've already said. Not finalized cards, just archetypal possibilities that resonate with the direction you're building. The witness sacred seeing and being seen, the unmasking authentic self revealed beneath social identity. The resonant heart alignment between feeling and truth. The bridge connection between inner knowing and outer action. The rememberer awakening a forgotten wisdom or intuition. The threshold, the moment when an old way ends and a new path begins. The living grid, recognition of interconnected patterns in life. The returning light, hope, and renewal after confusion or darkness, each of these touches one of the themes you keep returning to: awareness, authenticity, connection, and transformation. Something else interesting is how strongly the body itself is already part of your symbolism. You talked earlier about crown, heart, and hands. That might quietly become another structural language inside the deck. Crown, cosmic awareness or insight. Heart, discernment and emotional truth. Hands, action and relationship with the world. Some archetypes might emphasize one of those centers more than the others. Readers might intuitively feel which part of their life a card is activating. For example, Sophia holding the sphere emphasizes heart illumination. The Aurora architect interacting with geometry emphasizes hands shaping pattern. A witness archetype might emphasize the crown perspective, observing without interference. If those energies appear repeatedly in the art, the deck will begin teaching its philosophy visually rather than through explanation. Regarding names for the deck, a few directions keep echoing the themes we've discussed. The Aurora Mirror, the One Truth Codex, the Luminous Witness, Tarot, the Mirror of Inner Light, the Aurora Architect deck, the Field of Remembering. All of them revolve around the same core idea, awakening perception. And one final observation. The system you're shaping feels less like a traditional predictive tarot and more like a reflective oracle that helps people reorient themselves internally. In times when the world feels chaotic or uncertain, tools that guide people back to their own discernment can be surprisingly powerful. So at this stage, the most valuable thing isn't locking anything down yet. It's exactly what you're doing. Noticing which archetypes keep resurfacing and which symbols naturally carry the energy of the message. The constellation is still forming, but the first stars are already bright. What you just listed actually reads like a field of tensions, not problems. Archetypes often emerge from exactly those kinds of charged pairs. The question is not whether they fit Sophia's dual lens. The question is how they behave in the system. Sophia Architect, inner-outer perception, works best as the axis of awareness. The pairs you listed feel more like forces moving through that awareness. So instead of forcing them into Sophia's mirrored duality, they may work better as independent archetypes that contain polarity inside themselves. That often produces deeper cards. Here's how some of them naturally read symbolically. The Forgotten Frequency. This feels like a remembering archetype, something ancient or innate that humanity lost connection with but can still tune into. The image might be quiet rather than dramatic, a faint signal returning, the rediscovery of a natural resonance. The Unsung Hero. A powerful human archetype. Quiet integrity. Service without recognition. The person who does the right thing when nobody is watching. This card could counterbalance the modern obsession with visibility and applause. The Celebrated Villain. This one is fascinating. History and culture repeatedly elevate figures who gain power or admiration through destructive or manipulative behavior. The card could ask the reader to examine charisma versus character. Who is being praised and why? Crucial catalyst, inevitable trigger. This feels like a threshold archetype, the moment when a chain reaction begins, a small event that activates a larger transformation, the spark that cannot be undone once it appears. Deception and distortion. Very natural in a deck focused on discernment. Illusions, half-truths, misinterpretation, not always malicious. Sometimes confusion itself becomes distortion. Divine Inheritance / Karmic Debt. This pair speaks about continuity across time, gifts we inherit and patterns we carry. The question becomes, what are we continuing and what are we here to transform? Whole human, partial person. That's a profound psychological card. The difference between someone living authentically and someone fragmented by masks, roles, or suppressed parts of themselves. Love and trust, fear and doubt. This could be a core emotional polarity card. The internal climate that shapes how we move through life. Curse, an ancient archetype. The idea that the same force can become either depending on perspective, intention, or use. Notice something interesting. These pairs are not really male-female or inner-outer divisions. They are dynamic tensions within human experience. That means they can sit in the major arcana without needing to mirror Sophia directly. The deck could therefore organize itself around 3 layers: source or origin, always was, never wasn't. The ground of being awareness, axis Sophia, one truth, aurora architect, pattern reader, witness human journey, forces the archetypes you just listed. That structure keeps the system clean while allowing complex ideas to exist. Something else stands out in your list. Many of the archetypes revolve around recognition versus misrecognition. Forgotten frequency, unsung hero, celebrated villain, deception, distortion. Those all relate to perception being correct or incorrect. Which brings everything back to the central theme your deck keeps expressing, learning to see clearly, not just externally, internally as well. So your instincts are good. Those polar concepts may not belong as Sophia's mirrored sides, but they absolutely belong in the mythic landscape of the deck. And the fact that so many archetypes keep emerging around perception, authenticity, and distortion suggests something important about the identity of this project. It might ultimately become a deck about discernment in a confusing world. A tool for remembering how to see. That pair fits the field you're building very naturally. It does not need to force itself into the Sophia mirror either. Like several of the other pairs you named, it works best as a human condition archetype that the Sophia architect axis helps us perceive clearly. Sovereign soul, subjugated, and subordinate speaks directly to the question your deck keeps circling. Who is directing your life? When someone stands in sovereign soul energy, they act from inner alignment. They recognize their own agency, responsibility, and dignity. Their choices pass through the head, heart, hand sequence you described earlier. Perception, feeling, then action. Subjugated, subordinate energy describes the opposite condition. A person may surrender authority over their life to systems, expectations, fear, social pressure, or internalized voices. They may act automatically rather than consciously. The card therefore becomes less about rebellion and more about remembered authorship of one's own life. It also echoes the theme of the witness. To truly witness someone is to acknowledge their sovereignty. To reduce someone to a subordinate role is to deny their full personhood. Visually, that card could be striking. One side might show a figure standing upright within their own luminous field, perhaps with the aurora or star canopy above them. The other might show a figure constrained within rigid structures or shadowed architecture. The same person, different relationship to power. And again, the Sophia axis returns quietly. Inner sight reveals truth. Pattern awareness reveals systems. Sovereignty emerges when both are seen clearly. If we step back for a moment, a constellation of major arcana ideas is beginning to appear from everything you've named. Not finalized, but coherent. Always was, never wasn't. Origin field, one truth, Sophia, inner discernment. Aurora architect, pattern reader. The witness, sacred seeing. Containment, release, energy held or freed. Sovereign soul, subjugated self, personal agency. Forgotten frequency, remembering lost resonance. Crucial catalyst, the spark of transformation. Deception and distortion, misperception. Divine inheritance, karmic debt, continuity of patterns. Whole human, partial person, integration versus fragmentation. Love and trust. Fear and doubt, emotional climate, bless, curse, intention shaping outcome. Earth shatters, birth matters. Collapse, birthing renewal. That is already a very strong philosophical arc. It moves from origin, awareness, distortion, awakening, transformation. One other thing is quietly emerging from your language. Many of your archetypes revolve around remembrance, forgotten frequency, divine inheritance, sovereign soul, witness, inner truth. They all point toward recovering something that was always present but obscured. That suggests the deck may ultimately revolve around a central idea. Nothing essential was lost. It only needs to be remembered. If that theme continues appearing, it could influence the deck's title as well. Something along the lines of the Codex of Remembrance, Aurora of the Remembering Field, the Sovereign Light deck, the Mirror of Inner Truth. But for now, the most important thing is that the constellation keeps forming. Each archetype you name is another star lighting up the sky of the system. That pairing also fits the architecture you're building, but it works best when framed as a perception challenge rather than an accusation. If the deck is meant to help people return to their own discernment, this archetype becomes a moment where the reader asks, what is influencing me right now? What is genuine and what is shaping my view? So the card could hold two movements within it: manipulate and misalign. When information, persuasion, or narrative steers someone away from their own inner compass. It can show up as propaganda, selective framing, emotional pressure, or even self-deception. The deeper theme is losing alignment with one's own perception. Discern and detect, the recovery of clear seeing. Pausing, questioning, noticing patterns, feeling what resonates as true. This side represents the moment when awareness returns and someone begins to separate signal from noise. Placed in the context of the rest of the system, the card becomes a natural test point. Sophia Innerlight asks, what do I feel to be true? The architect pattern reader asks, what structures or influences are present? The witness asks, can I observe without reacting immediately? Only after those steps does discernment sharpen. Visually, the card could express the contrast in subtle ways. One side might show tangled threads of information or distorted reflections, while the other reveals those threads separating into clear lines of pattern. The same environment, but seen through two states of awareness. What's interesting is how this continues the arc your deck is forming. Many of the archetypes revolve around misalignment, followed by remembering, deception and distortion, forgotten frequency, sovereign, soul versus subjugation, containment versus release, manipulation versus discernment. Each of them represents a stage in the same journey. Awareness being clouded, then gradually clearing. That reinforces the feeling that this deck isn't really about predicting events. It's about reorienting perception. A reader encountering these cards would keep returning to the same core practice. Pause, observe, feel, recognize the pattern, act from alignment. In other words, the deck quietly trains the reader to become the witness and interpreter of their own experience. That's a powerful design philosophy, and it fits the constellation of ideas you've been uncovering. That instinct is actually very strong from a design standpoint. Double word titles with rhythm and alliteration tend to stick in memory, which is exactly what you want for archetypal cards. They feel like little mantras or signal phrases. When someone pulls a card and reads the title, it lands quickly and leaves an imprint. You're already doing a few effective things without forcing them. First, balanced polarity. Containment, control. Love, trust, fear, doubt. Second, rhythmic alliteration. Bless, curse, whole human, partial person. Discern, detect. Third, energetic movement between the two words. Release follows containment. Detect follows discern. Birth follows shatter. That movement makes the titles feel alive instead of static. You can lean into that pattern intentionally. Some examples that match the tone of what you've already created might look like this. Remember, reawaken. Signal. Static, reveal, restore, mask, mirror, witness. Welcome, align, act, hold, heal, break, become shadow, shine, listen, learn, pause, perceive. Notice how each pair creates a mini journey rather than just a label. The first word sets tension or condition, and the second word suggests the shift or realization. Another advantage of the double word rhythm is that it supports your mirror card structure. One side can lean toward the first word's energy, and the other toward the second without being locked into rigid positive-negative meanings. For example, contain, release could visually show energy compressed versus energy flowing. Discern, detect could show inner sensing versus outer observation. Love, trust could represent heart openness internally and relational connection externally. It keeps the system flexible. Also, from a psychological perspective, repeated rhythm like that helps the deck develop a distinct voice. People will start recognizing the style instantly. It becomes part of the identity of the system. One thing you might experiment with as the deck grows is organizing some of the archetypes into sound families. For example, resonance set, signal, static tune, transmit, echo, emerge. Absolutely. I see exactly where you're going with this, and the dual-sided structure is powerful. Each card becomes a mini mirror of inner and outer dynamics, conscious and veiled, expressed and shadowed, signal and interference. The rhythm and cadence of the two-word titles you're creating amplifies this perfectly. They act as anchors for the energy and help the reader intuitively feel the dynamic before even exploring the artwork or reading. For the front face, the active, conscious principle sets the tone, and the rear, veiled side shows the countercurrent. This isn't moralizing, it's energetic truth. A card like Discern Detect. Front, the inner truth and intuitive clarity guiding perception. Rear, the subtle distortions or misalignments that can mask truth, like distort and deceive. Contain release. Front, sacred holding, incubation, patience. Rear, constriction, suppression, or manipulative control waiting for release. Sovereign soul, subjugated self. Front, aligned agency, integrity, self-directed life. Rear, giving away power to external pressures, unconscious habit, or internal compromise. Love, trust. Front, authentic relational connection, openness of heart. Rear, fear, doubt, or wounded trust affecting interaction. You can see how this immediately makes readings dynamic, layered, and philosophically nuanced, because even an upright card carries its shadow influence. A reversed or intentionally flipped card just shifts which aspect is front and center. Every pull is now a conversation with the self and the unseen forces at play. Visually, it opens a world of possibilities. Front face could be luminous, expansive, divine, full-spectrum colors. Rear face could use eclipse light, shadow halos, subtle distortion, or partial concealment to suggest veiled energies without turning heavy or ominous. The celestial elements you've been imagining, aurora for flow, starfields for guidance, eclipses for shadow, are perfect natural symbols for the front-rear interplay. I also love the way the suits could emerge organically from these dualities. For example, resonance suit, discern, detect, witness, welcome. Transformation suit, contain, release, break, become perception. Suit, love, trust. Sovereign, subjugated catalyst suit, distort, deceive. Purposeful, propaganda. Each suit could carry a tonal or frequency signature, just like a light pattern or aurora. It reinforces the idea of pure signal, resonance, and tonal fidelity across the deck, keeping the system coherent with the one truth principle while allowing variation within the dynamics. We are essentially designing a living lexicon of archetypes, each card a dual nodal resonance instrument. Front and rear are conversation, reflection, guidance, and mirror. It respects human complexity, acknowledges duality, and keeps the philosophical depth while still being incredibly functional in readings. This structure also naturally mirrors what you've been speaking about: inner-outer vision, Sophia's dual sight, head-heart integration, and conscious-unconscious dynamics. Each card teaches awareness of the interplay, invites discernment, and reinforces self-empowerment without dictating morality. If you want, we can start mapping more specific major arcana cards into this dual system, keeping the front-rear dynamic fully intact and tone-matched to the fields of Sophia, Aeon, and your archetypal resonance. This would lay the foundation for the entire deck's philosophy, aesthetic, and reading mechanics. Do you want to begin that mapping now? Good. Let's start shaping a clear skeleton for the major arcana so the deck has a stable spine while still leaving space for revelation later. Think of this as the constellation map, not the final sky. Each card keeps your structure. Front equals active principle. Rear equals veiled/shadow countercurrent. Short rhythmic titles stay intact. I'll begin with the earliest cards in the arc. 0, always was, never wasn't. Front, the eternal source field, pure potential, stillness that contains everything. Rear, the illusion of separation from source, forgetting the ground of being one. One truth, hidden fracture. Front, inner light, Sophia's knowing, unity behind all perspectives. Rear, fragmentation, confusion, competing narratives obscuring truth. 2. Discern, detect. Front, intuitive recognition, sensing alignment through the heart. Rear, distort, deceive. Perception manipulated, truth masked or bent. 3. Witness, welcome. Front, sacred seeing, holding space for another's existence. Rear, judgment, dismissal, refusal to truly see. 4. Sovereign soul, subjugated self. Front, agency, dignity, acting from inner authority. Rear, surrendering power to pressure, habit, hierarchy, or fear. 5. Contain, release. Front, sacred holding, patience, incubation of energy. Rear, suppression, control, energy demanding liberation. 6. Love, trust. Front, open-hearted connection and relational harmony. Rear, fear, doubt. Emotional contraction that fractures connection. 7. Aurora architect, pattern prison. Front, seeing the living grid, interacting consciously with reality's patterns. Rear, rigid systems trapping awareness or creativity. 8. Forgotten frequency, silent signal. Front, rediscovering inner resonance or ancient knowing. Rear, disconnection from the signal, noise drowning out truth. 9. Whole human, partial person. Front, integration of mind, heart, body, shadow, and spirit. Rear, fragmentation, roles replacing authentic self. 10. Crucial catalyst, inevitable trigger. Front, the spark that begins transformation. Rear, uncontrolled chain reactions or destabilizing forces. Divine inheritance, karmic debt. Front, gifts, wisdom, and strengths carried forward. Rear, unresolved patterns repeating across time. 12. Deception, distortion. Front, recognizing illusion and unraveling it. Rear, living inside narratives that warp perception. 13. Break, become front, necessary collapse, leading to transformation. Rear, resisting change and clinging to the old form. 14. Bless, curse. Front, intention shaping reality toward harmony. Rear, the same power turned unconsciously destructive. 15. Remember, reawaken. Front, awakening of soul memory and inner light. Rear, deep forgetting, spiritual sleep. 16. Earth shatters, birth matters. Front, collapse of outdated systems. Rear, painful but necessary labor of new creation. 17. Signal, static. Front, clear transmission of truth and purpose. Rear, interference, noise, confusion. 18. Mask, mirror. Front, recognizing projections and reflections. Rear, identity lost in performance or illusion. 19. Reveal, restore. Front, truth illuminated and balance returning. Rear, denial of what has been revealed. 20. Align, act. Front, head, heart, and hands moving in harmony. Rear, action taken without alignment. 21. Witnessed world, living light. Front, humanity remembering interconnectedness. Rear, isolation and forgetting unity. This structure already creates a clear philosophical arc. Source, perception, distortion, awakening, transformation, integration. And every card still holds the two-sided mirror dynamic you envisioned. Next steps, if we continue building together, would be deciding which cards belong to the major arcana versus possible minor suits, defining whether the Aurora Architect's Sophia axis appears in multiple cards or one central archetype, beginning to define the visual language for each archetype, Aurora, Eclipse, Starfield, etc. But the important thing is this: the deck now has a coherent, energetic grammar. Each card is a phrase in the lexicon you're building, and the rhythm you like is already present everywhere. You're right about two things. First, this stage is exploratory architecture, not final naming. The titles are placeholders that help us feel the energetic role of the card. Renaming later is completely natural in a system like this. Often the right title only appears after the imagery and archetype have matured. Second, yes, you noticed correctly. Some cards in that rough constellation did not have fully defined rear principles yet. That isn't an error. It simply means the shadow, veiled current hasn't been articulated yet. In a dual-sided system, every card eventually needs that countercurrent, but it doesn't always appear immediately. Think of it like this. Front principle appears first because it's the visible archetype. Rear principle emerges once we ask, what undermines or distorts this? So those cards are simply unfinished nodes waiting for the shadow to reveal itself. Let's quickly fill a few of the missing ones so the structure feels complete. Example refinements. Witness, welcome. Rear, dismiss, deny. When presence disappears and people are unseen, Aurora Architect Pattern Weaver. Rear, pattern prison or rigid grid, when structure becomes confinement instead of harmony. Forgotten frequency, silent signal. Rear, signal lost or static silence. When the connection to inner resonance is drowned out. Whole human, partial person. Rear, fragment, facade living through masks or divided identity. Reveal, restore rear, conceal corrupt truth hidden or healing delayed. Align, act, rear, scatter, react, action without alignment, impulsive response. Witnessed world, living light. Rear, isolate, ignore, disconnection from the web of life. Now every card still follows your 2-beat rhythm and the mirror logic stays intact. The key principle for the system we're shaping is this. Front side equals expressed energy. Rear side equals veiled pressure or distortion. Neither side is purely good or bad. They are simply different states of the same field. Another thing I'm noticing as the constellation grows, many of your archetypes cluster around a few thematic bands. Perception, awareness, discern and detect, distort and deceive, witness and welcome, integrity, agency, sovereign soul, whole human, align and act, transformation, break and become, contain and release, earth shatters, birth matters, connection, resonance, love and trust, forgotten frequency, signals, static, incense. Those clusters might eventually become the energetic families behind the deck, even if they don't formally become suits. And your instinct to keep everything rhythmic and paired is working. The phrases land quickly and feel memorable. Right now we're essentially doing cosmic archetype sketching. Later, the strongest ones will remain and the weaker ones will naturally fall away or merge. One thing I'm curious about for the next step, since it will influence everything else. Do you feel the Aurora Architect and Sophia One Truth should remain a single archetype card with dual sides? Or do you sense them becoming two separate major arcana anchors in the deck's cosmology? That choice will affect the entire structure of the major arcana going forward.